Hello, Com 105. This is your instructor, David Weber, and I'm sitting on my front porch. I probably should stop rocking. You can hear the rain in the background, perhaps. It is Wednesday the 16th, and I am redoing yesterday's lecture on argumentation. For some reason, and this happens with a lot of the video recordings for all of my courses, I had the devil's own time trying to get it uploaded onto Canvas. I don't know why, but it wasn't working. It's happened in some other classes. It's happened for a couple in Com 105. So for these that don't upload, I'm going to be redoing them. I'll see if I can bring this in 18, 20 minutes. But at least you'll have this audio-visual record of the material we covered yesterday on argumentation. The show notes are on Canvas already, so you can see those. And I'll cover the material that we did yesterday, and here we go. So the topic yesterday was argumentation, and we started out by defining argument. And we don't use the word argument the way that it's sort of commonly used. You know, oftentimes we talk about an argument between two people. You know, a couple of people are yelling at each other, trying to get the other to buy into what you're saying, and you disagree and you have an argument. That's not the way we use the term argument. In Com 105, in communication studies, we probably would call that scenario a conflict scenario, perhaps. But we would try to avoid calling it an argument, because we like to reserve the word argument for a very particular type of communication, a particular type of rhetorical communication. So the way we use the word argument, and the way I'll be using it, unless I tell you otherwise, is an argument is a clearly articulated, well-designed, planned statement of an idea that I, the reader, want you to buy into, and I give you some reasons why you should buy into it. On the green arrow of rhetoric, an argument can be used anywhere. So if you remember the green arrow of rhetoric, it starts at one end, take your ideas seriously, and then next it's accept your ideas, and then it's be persuaded to take some action by what I propose, and then finally it's be persuaded to lay it on the line for the rhetoric. And an argument comes into play all along those various categories of rhetorical communication. So when I'm making an argument, what I'm doing is I'm proposing what you should consider is correct and accurate and right or true or acceptable. And then I'm giving you some reasons why you should think that way. So an argument has two main parts. One part is called the claim, and the other part is called the reasoning. And the reasoning has two parts. And one part of the reasoning is called the evidence or the proof, and the second part is called the warrant. Now let's go back, and I'm going to define all those terms and give you some illustrations. So a claim is the statement, ideally, clear, cogent, easy to understand, of what I want you to believe, accept, be persuaded to do. The statement of what I want you to buy into. So an example of a claim, and this is the one I was using in class the other day, an example of a claim is you should not text when you drive. Another claim, we use this in class as an example, another claim would be, and this will be controversial, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time, the GOAT of basketball players. Now, some of you would not buy into that no matter what I was able to say. And you would say, no, LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time, the GOAT. That's another claim. Ideally, if you really wanted to make a good argument, you'd have some reasons why you think that is correct. And from your point of view, ideally, if I accept those reasons, I will buy into the claim. I'll buy into your argument. So the claim is the statement. Now, there are three types of claims. One type is called a claim of policy. Another type is called a claim of value, and another type is called a claim of fact. So let's start with the claim of policy. Well, one of the claims I used to illustrate the concept of claim was a claim of policy. The claim of policy that I used was, you should not text while you drive. A claim of policy is a statement about something that should be done or not done, a path that should be followed or not followed, a way of doing something that ought to be pursued or not. And the key words to listen for when you're wanting to determine, let me start over again. Each type of claim has some distinctive language that you would want to listen for if it's a spoken language argument, like in a speech, or just you talking with a friend and he or she is wanting to make an argument. There's some words you'd want to listen for to be able to figure out what kind of claim is being made. And if it's an argument that's in writing, same thing. You'd want to look at the piece of writing, and you'd want to look at the claim, and you'd want to look for certain words that would tip you off to what kind of claim is being made. So a claim of policy, the key words to listen for are should not, ought not, must not, have to, don't have to, those kind of words, because as you can discern from those words are all about telling you about something that the rhetor, the person making the argument, the advocate, that's another word, by the way, we could use, the advocate, the rhetor, he or she is wanting you to take certain steps, and that's a claim of policy. So you should not text while you drive. You have to take seriously the command to wear masks when you go inside a shop. You must listen to oral directions given to you by the judge if you go to a court of law. I mean, all of these are examples of claims of policy. You could hear must, should, have to, and so forth. You shouldn't step on someone's toes if you're dancing with him or her. I mean, that's another claim of policy. Okay, claim of value. Claim of value is a claim about the merits or the relative excellence, goodness of some set of conditions, or some person or some circumstance. So claim of value, you heard that already. Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time, the GOAT of basketball. By the way, I may have said Michael Jackson earlier. I meant Michael Jordan. Or LeBron James is the GOAT of basketball. And, you might talk to some older guy or girl, and he says, or she says, are you kidding me? Oscar Robertson's the GOAT of all time. And probably a lot of you don't know who Oscar Robertson was. Google him. But anyway, my personal opinion is Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. That's just me. And all you LeBron fans out there, don't hate on me. It's just my opinion. But I'm not giving you a very good argument. I'm just telling you, I'm just making a claim, and we'll get to that in a moment. So, a claim of value. The worst movie ever made is Waiting. And I really do believe that. Again, not a very good argument because I'm just making a claim. So, these are claims of value. A claim of value, as I said, expresses relative goodness or badness or rightness or wrongness with respect to some condition, some action. Now, claim of fact. That has become a slippery concept fact. We hear all the time we hear the phrase alternate facts. we hear people who say things like, well, your facts just are not my facts. Let's not complicate this unduly. Let's not put our heads into, the third decade of the 21st century with this complication. Let's look at fact, the concept of fact. Let's look at that in its narrowest, most traditional way. A fact is a condition in the world of reality that we inhabit. So right now you can hear the sound of the rain, and it is a fact that it is raining here in Wilmington, North Carolina, at least in my part of town. It is a fact that I'm rocking in my rocking chair right now. It is a fact that Donald Trump is the current president of the United States. It is a fact that Joe Biden was born in Scranton, Ohio. These are facts. They're statements of a real condition, a real circumstance in the real world that we inhabit. And the idea is that if you make a claim of fact, it's something that can be very easily verified, very easily checked and confirmed or disconfirmed. So that's the first part of any argument, the claim. The second part of any argument is the reasoning. And the reasoning is all of the information that the rhetor or the advocate issues to strengthen the claim or to make the claim totally believable in order to strengthen the argument. So the more convincing your reasoning, the more likely your audience, if it's one person or if it's 100 people or 1,000, the better your reasoning, the stronger your reasoning, the more believable your claim is, and therefore the more meritorious your argument is. And that's a good word to know because I will be using it a lot, and so will my colleagues. A meritorious argument means an argument in which the claim is backed up by, it's supported by the reasoning, and it's supported very solidly, and it's supported in a difficult to deny manner. I mean, you can certainly disagree, but you have to take it seriously if the reasoning's really good. So, reasoning consists of, number one, evidence. And evidence is that information that you give that does the bulk of the work, if you will, of the reasoning. If you don't have any evidence, you don't have any reasoning. The evidence is the information that specifies what is so that causes the claim to be believable. So let me go back to the Michael Jordan, LeBron James situation and give you an illustration. A number of years ago, I was watching on ESPN a debate on who was the GOAT, who was the GOAT, the greatest of all time in basketball. This was a few years ago. It was a little bit before LeBron came on the scene strongly. He was still new in his career. So the debate was actually between Michael Jordan versus Kobe Bryant. And I personally have always liked both those guys. I've always liked Kobe. And he had some problems with, a lot of people thought he was arrogant and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, to me, it was a very interesting debate because I liked both of them. So the guy who is supporting Kobe as the GOAT, he started citing a whole bunch of statistics and, goals and, goals per, month or whatever he was doing. He's going all over the map with these statistics. Very impressive stuff. And, he said, so for those reasons, I think Kobe's the GOAT. And the other guy said, well, he said, those are pretty impressive statistics you're giving me. But, let me give you just 3 words that'll tell you why I think that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time. And he says, 5 championship rings. And the other guy went, well, yeah. He said, yeah, that's pretty impressive. Kobe can't say that. And here you have 2 people who are both making meritorious arguments. I mean, the whole nature of basketball, it's only, 5 guys on the floor, 5 players, I should say, on the floor, guys or girls, 5 players on the floor. The entire team is, only, let's say a couple of dozen players. But you can have a really successful basketball team by just having one really good player. And if that basketball team wins 5 champions in the space of 7 years, and that one really good player has been on the team all those years, that's a pretty good indicator that that player is potentially the greatest of all time. That was a reasonable argument to make. So that's good. Those are 2 good arguments, 2 meritorious arguments, the one about Kobe and the one about Michael Jordan. And the interesting thing here is, and this points to something that's really distinctive of claims of policy and value, there is no ultimate right answer. As much as I really like Michael Jordan, as much as I think the 5 championship rings is, not bad reasoning, I also respect the argument that the other guy was making about Kobe at the time and all the statistics he was able to issue that really, started to make me believe that, it's not crazy to think that Kobe is the GOAT. So the idea here is that your reasoning, even if your reasoning's good, and let's talk about evidence specifically, even if your evidence is good, even if your evidence is strong, there's really no way that you can say your argument is the only correct way to think of things with policy and value. The question is, are you an effective enough rhetor to make an argument that is meritorious and ultimately so strong that it's difficult to accept anything other than your argument? You still can recognize there are counter arguments, but still the argument that you're making is really the way to go. So that's the sort of the goofy thing about claims of policy and claims of value. There's no outside ultimate reality that confirms that you are absolutely right. Whereas a claim of fact, that does exist. I mean, I'm right here. Come out on the porch and take a look and listen to the rain. You can't deny that it's raining. Whereas we could argue for days about who the greatest team in professional baseball is. Maybe we'd start agreeing with each other. Maybe you'd convince me. Maybe I'd convince you that my argument was better or that your argument was better. But there would be no absolute way of ever knowing what that would be. It's all based on informed opinion and meritorious arguments. So that gets us to the last of the topics here, and that's the second part of reasoning. So reasoning consists of evidence, also known as proof, and warrant. And warrant is the hardest of these to really understand. The warrant is, first of all, it's a chunk of information. And it's a chunk of information that makes the evidence good or bad, strong or weak. So again, let's go back to Michael Jordan and the guy's argument. Michael Jordan is the GOAT because with him as the captain and the key player on the Chicago Bulls, they won 5 championships out of 7 or 8 years in a row, a stretch of 7 or 8 years. Well, what makes that a good argument? I gave you the warrant earlier when I explained, when I was saying that, the nature of basketball is if you got one great player on a team, he or she can really bring the team up. That was the warrant. That was information that, if you know a little bit about basketball, you would be able to recognize that that's long been an understanding about the nature of the game, And so the warrant is that chunk of information about how basketball works. The warrant for the statistics that the other guy was putting forth in his argument about Kobe, the warrant for that had sort of a couple of layers, a couple of legs. One was that he was citing statistics from a credible source, whatever the sort of the magic book of basketball statistics is, but he was citing actual statistics compiled by professional statisticians who have made it their job, their life's work, to make sure they have correct and accurate and clearly articulated statistical information, data. And then the second leg of that warrant the warrant for that evidence was similar to what I was saying before. If you know a little bit about basketball, you would know that excellence, according to these various statistical measures, is a pretty good indicator of excellence as a player. And the more of those statistical measures that you're at the top of the list in, the more likely it's going to be that you're the greatest of all time, or maybe at least one of the top couple of greatest of all time. So that's the warrant. The warrant is, I said it was a chunk of information that makes the evidence strong. And another way of thinking about it is an explanation of why the evidence is strong. So let's take another example. Let's do a claim of policy. This is the example I used in class. You should not text while you drive. Claim of policy. Some of you may right away agree with it because you already buy into it. Others may be skeptical. But if we were getting serious here, what I would do is, or if I were to start making reference to studies that have been done over a period of years, again and again and again, by the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, studies conducted under the aegis, in other words, under the authority of some of the greatest universities in the country, University of Michigan, Dartmouth, I think Stanford, many of these universities, Ohio State, many of these universities did studies that were funded by the NTSB to discover just how dangerous or not it is to text while you drive. And one after the other, these studies came to the conclusion it's really bad news to text while you drive. So the warrant is, the NTSB is a national federal agency, heavily funded, taken very seriously as something to fund in the national government. It's been around for many years, many decades. It has contributed a great deal to everything from safety awareness to automobile safety to safer roads. I mean, the NTSB has a long track record as a federal agency of keeping us safe and funding studies that can be used to help keep us safe. So that's the warrant, that explanation that I gave of just who is putting out these studies. Because realize this, it's possible that I said, well, look, the NTSB did all these studies over a period of years, and the statistics were that, 75% of the time if someone was texting, they, couldn't keep to a straight driving course. You could say, well, who the heck's the NTSB? I don't know about these studies. Well, then I'd have to explain why that was good evidence, why that was commendable proof of my claim. And that explanation, that's the warrant. Now, let's do this again. Let's imagine that someone comes over to you and says, you should feel free to text while you drive. And you say, wow, that's very interesting. Runs against what I've heard all this time. And the person says, yeah, well, 2/3 of drivers tested for texting while driving had no problem at all driving very safely and correctly. It was just as if they weren't texting at all. Only 1/3 had a problem. And you go, wow, that's amazing. Tell me about this study. And the person says, well, in my sociology class last semester, We were supposed to do a project where we interviewed 3 people about their opinion on a certain topic. And the topic I picked was texting while driving, and I interviewed 3 classmates, and 2 of the 3 said they didn't think it was a problem at all. They did it all the time, and they'd never been in an accident. And then one classmate I interviewed said, "Oh, I'm never going to text again." He said, I texted this one time, and I was paying so much attention. I rear-ended this lady, and I got a whiplash, and she got injured, and my insurance went up. It was really awful. I'm never going to text again. And I say, so let me get this straight. What you're telling me is that you're suggesting that texting is okay based on 2 out of 3 people in your class that you just happen to ask, hey, what's your opinion about texting while driving? The person says, yeah. I said, well, the warrant for that evidence isn't very impressive. I mean, the evidence itself, 2/3 of drivers have no trouble driving well, even while texting. That evidence is actually, wow, that sounds pretty good. Now I'm suddenly rethinking this thing. For years I thought, geez, you shouldn't text while you drive, but you're telling me it's okay to text while you drive. You should feel free to text while you drive because 2/3 blah, blah, blah. But the warrant was this information about how she or he got this 2/3 figure. It's terrible, terrible evidence. It's not good proof. It's not strong proof, even though it sounds good, but the warrant tells you it's really not very strong or impressive at all. So that's what we talked about yesterday. A couple more things I will add in, but that was basically it. And to review, an argument